Yeah, yes. Does that mean that everyone's now plugged in and listening, JP?
They are indeed.
That's good.
You are on tape and live.
Yeah, which, and I kind of like this because the way it leads us is that we're just having a conversation, which is exactly the way, we want to have a talk like this between someone like Keith and myself and everyone who's listening, because we're all cartoonists and we all kind of share a lot of the same things. And I guess I should do a kind of official opening to our conversation. And first, I'm Kevin Kallaugher. I'm the editorial cartoonist for The Economist magazine, at Baltimore Sun, Counterpoint, and elsewhere. And I'm so pumped and so excited to be with my colleague, Keith Knight, who is a accomplished cartoonist and now has also found his way onto the silver screen. And I hope that we'll be able to talk a lot about all this stuff. But we were just talking about as kids. And I think that this is a kind of an interesting place to start because, Keith, you were saying that, you're homeschooling your kids and you were working at home a lot. And, one of the things about in this cartoon world that we're in, everybody's job is different. Everyone's path is completely different. And everyone's studio is completely different. And so like when you're working at home and you got your kids at home, you got a place where you can draw, either A, get away from them, or do you operate with them around? I mean, you kind of paint a picture for us, what your time at home is like.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough during the day to do it. That's why I got this office to go to, because we did the writer's room over Zoom for season 2 because of COVID. And so it was a great excuse to like have the studio pay for an office for me. And and I just kept it like after the writer's room closed because it was just a great refuge. I do have an office downstairs like that's connected to my kids' playroom, and I'll go down there at night after they go to sleep, but I don't know. It just turned out to be a big mess. My studio's a mess, so I actually keep my office immaculate. But I still go out to cafes. Like I've always come up with my best ideas out on the streets, on the hard streets of Scarborough. But just in cafes, at bars, even in airports, like, and in fact, I just did my first slideshow in person in a year and a half. And while I was on that flight, we've been trying to finish, we're editing episode 8 of season 2. And we're having a hard time sort of figuring out the ending. And I just came up with it on the flight to my slideshow. And I just realized like my best ideas come when I'm on the road or when I'm just out somewhere, just interacting and dealing with folks. So
why do you think that is though? I mean, why would that happen?
I just think it's sort of getting out of your own head, I think, is important to and just getting different perspectives. For me, getting different perspectives that maybe skew similar to mine, but then go a different way, or just seeing something that makes me go, oh, wow, okay, I could take this and go this way, or just the experience of maybe overhearing or seeing something that that will just jog some sort of idea out of my head. I just think it just gets you out of your comfort zone. I was so nervous, like flying for some reason, just because I just hadn't done it in a while. And I was just like, oh man, I hope the plane doesn't crash.
So a little fear goes a good way toward coming up with ideas, right? But in fact, often for people, the fear is of deadlines, right? So some people love deadlines because they make people kind of concentrate better.
Oh, totally. I think deadlines are huge. I wouldn't have gotten anything done if I didn't have deadlines. Like
Mm,
I learned that in college. Like there's two types of teachers. There's the teacher that is like super hardcore, like you have to get this done by this time and blah blah blah. And then there's others like, oh, just come in when you need to and just submit. Like those are the worst teachers to me. I flunked ceramics because I had a teacher like that. It's just like, I just come in anytime, blah blah blah. And so I flunked ceramics, and that I learned a lesson then. I was like, I have to have editors. I have to have people that I have to answer to, or I'm not going to finish it. I'm just going to be like,
mm,
eh, you know?
mm. Well, I'm going to give everybody just a little frame of reference here because you did mention about here and what here is for you. You currently live in the triangle down in North Carolina, and then the writers' room you're talking about, of course, is the Hulu television series called Woke, which is semi-autobiographic. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. And you just got a second season, which is exceptionally cool. And we'll talk, about all that good stuff too. But one of the interesting things for me when I saw the first episode, right? So the first episode is about this. It's this guy Keith, right? Cartoonist, and you give a feeling that the guy's been in the wilderness up to that time professionally. He's things have, he's been out there slogging away like all of us did. And then suddenly he's got it, right? He's got the big break. It's his life, his professional life is about to explode. And then something happens. I'm now going to shift it over to you and the real Keith, your progress, your life as a cartoonist artist, from the time you started to the point that you got to Hulu. Give us a little feed about all of that stuff. What has been going on during that time?
Well, I mean, the show is like squishing 30 years into like 8 episodes.
Right.
And so for me, I've always known I wanted to be a cartoonist forever. And when I was in college, I did my first strips in high school and in junior high school. And I'd incorporate it into my schoolwork and stuff like that. But I started doing a regular strip in college. But my college didn't have any classes about cartooning. I mean, barely anybody did back in the day. And I went to the same school as Mark Parisi did, actually, Salem State College back then. He graduated a year before I showed up there.
And this is in Massachusetts, right?
In Massachusetts, Salem, right. Massachusetts. And I would just say to my advisor, this was the hardcore guy, I would say, because it looked like you either took fine arts or you took graphic design. And I said, I'll take graphic design because that's what I have to take, but I'm just going to be a cartoonist. And he goes, you gotta know this, you gotta know this, that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to be a cartoonist. And this guy was so hardcore on me. It's super hardcore. And I was just doing autobiographical cartoons about keg parties and stuff. But I had this teacher, this American literature teacher, and I tell this story all the time. It was my first Black teacher. So that was huge. And having this Black teacher, he was an American literature teacher, and he assigned us as people to read Maya Angelou, Richard Wright, Ralph Ellis, and James Baldwin. And when people were like, how come you're giving us all Black writers? He said, I'm giving you all American writers. And that exploded my brain, because we had always taught that Mark Twain that's American writing. That's an American writer. And this guy was basically subverting the system, telling you like that everything they taught you in school, they only taught you from one perspective. There's a lot more going on. And so from then on, I was like, you know what? I'm wasting my time drawing cartoons about keg parties. Like, I need to draw it and show that it's from the perspective of somebody you don't not usually hear from. And so, and that was a huge thing to me. Like when I was in school, all through up through high school, like I never got books that had protagonists of people of color, people who were the lead. So, you know, there were more books where dogs were and pigs and like stuff like that. So for me, it was super important to create a comic strip where the lead was a black man. And that translates to woke, which is what happens when, you know, you see this commercial and there's like 3 or 4 white people, and then there's a couple of peripheral people of color on the ends there, just to, you know, diversify it. What's the story of that one black guy right there, you know, and put him to the forefront. And like, and that's, you know, that's what I wanted to do with woke, which is like that guy who basically can code switch, like has, like, you know, is hangs out with white people, and just like what goes on in his head when something like reminds him of how black he is, like, and just, so that was really sort of the interesting thing to do. And I think we did a good job with it with the first season.
Yeah, you know, you know, prior to woke, you had a pretty good career as a cartoonist, right? I mean, you've been getting pretty well known. In fact, in 2010, you got a career achievement award. Man, that was 12 years ago, dude. It's like your career, it was not over.
You know what? Steven Spielberg got one a year later, so I beat Spielberg by 1. Yeah. No, I mean,
it's kind of crazy, right? I mean, like you were doing what you were doing. You were doing some pretty good stuff, and there was so much to commend what you've been doing. And one of the things I always loved about you too, because you're comfortable in front of people, you performed. In fact, a lot of people don't know that you were a Michael Jackson impersonator, right, as a teenager.
Yes, I was. And that you know, that really, I have a long gestating graphic novel that I've been working on for like decades now. And, you know, I did a Kickstarter for it, and sort of the success of that sort of coincided with like the show starting to go and happen. And so I've had to, like, sadly put 1,000% into the show, and then like put 2% into the graphic novel. But one of the points of the graphic novel was like doing that Michael Jackson impersonating stuff. I was always like, you know, like a shy, quiet kid. And because I would put on those sunglasses and put on that glove and just totally change into a different person, kind of, but just it helped me. If I didn't do that, I would have never started a band in college. I would have never then had a band in San Francisco and toured around and did all that stuff. I would have never been doing the slideshows that I do around the country and around the world, actually. And it was that sort of early stuff. It's really absurd when you think about it. You just play this little cassette tape in here and then pretend to sing this song. And I wasn't good at it at all, you know, but I was skinny and black, and so it, you know, it went over well. But
what I was thinking is that, you know, because of all those things, right? And I've seen your stand-up, you know, presentation, and it is amongst the best that I've ever seen, you know, of the people that do the kind of thing we do. It's thought out, it's clever, it's funny, but it's also got an arc to it. I mean, really, it's got all the pieces together. You look like you're really enjoying it and really into it. But it also taught me that you you have all of these skill sets that can now point you in a direction toward, writing a screenplay, creating a show like this. Because not everybody can be a comic strip artist and then some, hey, I'm going to write an 8-part series, or I'm going to create something like this. It's a big leap. But for you, when I saw it happening, to me, it seemed almost natural. I said, look, this guy's got all these skill sets that all come together. I was wondering, from your perspective, that leap from cartooning to now to creating and executive producer and pulling together a full series, new characters, all that. I mean, tell me a little bit about that creative process.
I will say this. I think as cartoonists, we have a great foundation to create television and film, because what we do is we work visually, and we work with, we set the stage and we write the lines and do all this different stuff. I would say that the thing that probably made it that I have the skill set for is and the reason why I draw in cafes and bars and everything is I am a people person. I don't like being by myself, holed up in some place. Like, I love interacting with people, and so that's what I loved about being in a band. Is and it's a perfect balance with being a cartoonist, because as a cartoonist, you control everything, you do everything is you. But I love the idea of bringing an idea to a group of people and them taking the idea and making it far more interesting and better than I could ever make it by myself. And that's what a TV or film production is, which is, I've got this basic idea, but I mean, frankly, the reason why we went with how we, focused on the time being profiled by the police was, my co-creator, because it happened to him too. It's like, why don't we focus on this moment, and the idea of to not make it 2D animation, but to make it puppetry and use all this surreal stuff was our director, Mo Marable, who came with a lookbook. A lookbook is what a director pitches as to what he wants the show to sort of emulate. His lookbook featured Do the Right Thing, which is my favorite film. Sorry to Bother You, which is someone I know from the Bay Area, like this crazy, insane film. Amelie, which is my wife's favorite film, and then Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is like one of me and my wife's favorite couples films, so he just came with like a perspective that just elevated everything. And then with each actor that came on, I had no idea we would get like the guy from New Girl and the guy from Workaholics and Sashir from SNL, like all these super amazing people involved. And then all the voice talent, like just people just reading the script and being like, wow, this is great. I've never seen this before, just that type of thing. So I just sit there and just like, believe me, like, and Steve Notley came to visit me on set. Like, I was just so into just walking all around and just, I would talk to everybody from the people who build the sets to somebody who's just like in the background, to somebody who's doing lights, like, and just, I'm so humbled and thankful to have put to work all these hundreds of people, like to provide, something for all these folks to channel their creative energy into. And I just, this season 2 was so funny because a lot of the people I would talk to had no idea who I was.
Good. Well, that's almost better, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't until like a week before we finished shooting, one of the snack guys was like, "How come you didn't tell me who you were?" And I said, "Well, would you have I don't know, what would you have done if I said, hey, I'm the guy who does all this, like you wouldn't be working if it wasn't for me.
Mm.
But I just, I just love it. It's just an adventure, right? It's just um and as cartoonists, we are observers. So it just made sense for me to walk around and just look at and check out everything,
Well, to kind of give everybody just a little reference, so the show is an 8-part series and is based in San Francisco, and this young cartoonist is about ready to take the big launch, and then he has a confrontation and with the police with a lot of racial overtones that completely changes his approach, and he has dotted throughout the episodes some inanimate objects that talk to him. And my favorite is his pen. So the cartoonist's pen actually comes alive and talks to him. And there's a great scene, I think it might be in the last episode, if not the penultimate one, where the actor the person who plays you is amazing. I mean, the talent, as you were saying, that the acting talent in it, comic geniuses as well as acting stars. And his name is Lamorne Morris, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so he has this really deep, passionate conversation with his own pen, of telling his pen to help him and all this stuff. And every cartoonist can kind of identify to this to some degree. It is a really brilliant piece.
Yeah, it was so cool that how just each thing came together, and how we were just I really love doing the animation and having it come from so many different places. Sort of I saw it's kind of like the Sixth Sense, how like you didn't know where the ghost was going to come from. So it was kind of like, how can we manifest this animation in a bunch of different ways? And yeah, and some of the obviously memorable animated sequences, came from Marker, and came from Marker obviously returns in the second season, and we have a couple of the other things that return in the second season, and we're also doing some other things beyond just the animation, because at this point now in season 2 he's gone to therapy, so
right, which
Yeah.
he definitely needs. When anybody starts talking to his pen and gets caught, I think most people would think that they need to seek therapy. Well, I was wondering, as far as the character who plays you, and everyone imagines, in life, if there was a movie made about their life, who would play them, right? And I was curious, did you have any say in the selection of the person who represented you?
I had a say in everything, which is
Mhm.
which is for better or for worse. But it's funny because we had a particular other actor in mind, and but he had this deal to develop his own show, and he loved our script so much, so he was trying to do both at the same time, but he couldn't do it. And Lamorne had seen the script, and he was like, oh my God, this is me. And he just, he talked to his manager and said, like, get me this thing. And we had a bunch of people come through, but I think once he did an audition, we had this sequence that we did, and I don't think it never ended up anywhere, but I really dug it. It was a talking jar of mayonnaise in the condiment aisle, and the jar of mayonnaise, and this is based on one of my earlier comic strips, where the mayonnaise was mad because they used to be at the top of the condiment aisle, and now you got all these salsas and srirachas and soy sauces coming in, taking my job. And so he's on the floor and talking and then someone comes up, it's like, can I help you? And just once you saw him do it, like, you're just like, oh my God, yeah, like he's the one, And so it in retrospect, it was like, he didn't even need to try out. It's just really, really good.
They are
And
so good. I mean,
yeah.
because I imagine too that, for them to act against things that are inanimate and not even there, there's a lot of skill set there.
Well, and again, this is a testament to Mo Marable, the director. He said, like, I want puppetry because I want them talking to something. So we had like bottles, bottle puppets, and we had a marker puppet, and so they could actually really see it. And the flat 2D stuff really cheapens things. And that's one of the reasons why we made Toast and Butter 2D, is because they were sort of flat and they didn't have much depth to them. So
yeah, and Toast and Butter, for those folks out there, was the comic strip that the Unreal Keith was going to explode onto the landscape with. And this was this kind of in milk toast, if you like, or nondescript comic strip that he was going to explode. But then after his interaction with the San Francisco police, he gets hardened, life changes, his life changes, and the world changes. And that's kind of the thrust of the story. And the story gets really fun after that.
And that's literally how we came up with the characters, Toast and Butter. How I came up with it was like, I was like, milk toast, like,
right.
What can be, and I was just, and it was the first thing that came to my head, Toast and Butter. and how some things you just say, okay, like that came too fast. There must be a better idea. So you spend like a couple of days trying to think of something else, but it was just like, this is it, Toast and Butter. Like and I figured if everything failed miserably, I could just really do Toast and Butter strips, just come up with it. And I actually did a few Toast and Butter strips,
oh, really?
which I included. What did I include it in? I think did I put it in the last book I did? But I am actually doing some Toast and Butter t-shirts very soon. This is it's something that I probably slept on when it first came out, but they look very good. So I'm looking forward. Yeah.
Well, no, a couple of questions just relating to getting into this. I'm sure a lot of people say, well, how do you get a TV show? I mean, so what did you do? How do you get a TV show?
Yeah. How do you get a TV show? I know. Listen, like, it's so funny because my co-creator, who has been in the business for 15 or 20 years, and he's like, you don't know how lucky you are. He kept on saying, you don't know how lucky I've been in this business. I've never gone this far. He just kept on saying over and over again. And every meeting we'd have, he'd go, they're going to pull the plug. They're going to pull the plug. He kept on saying that. Really? We're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. And once he started to say, we're going to have a TV show, like once he started to turn, I was like, okay, it's going to happen. But how do you get a TV show? I would say that it helps to be in Los Angeles. Now, when we officially got it, I was in North Carolina. I had already moved from Los Angeles, but I think it was important for me to be there because there's a whole lot of schmoozing involved. Like you just got to meet people and you got to find people that you can depend on. And that takes a little while. And people that I think saw the potential in what I had. And the biggest thing is to have intellectual property, to have have work that, because that's all Hollywood is looking for right now, is intellectual property that they can develop into something. So it's great to be a cartoonist and have the rights to your stuff. Like, so if you create something, hang on to your rights. And so I had obviously decades worth of stuff and just a perspective that I think people found unique, just the way I approach things. And I would, I had my stories of sort of, one of the stories I told in the room to sell the show was how I was on a Muni bus once. That's the San Francisco Muni. And there were these kids in the back 15-year-old kids that were swearing up a storm. They're saying all this terrible stuff. There's all these old ladies on the bus. It's extremely offensive. And there's this guy sitting sideways in the middle of the bus, and he's about my age, and you could tell he must have been a slam poet or something, because he said in a very booming voice, he was like, "Yo, I don't like my ears being poisoned by this Vectiv," like super loud. And the kids, they all shut up. They got all quiet. And so all the old ladies are turning around going, "Thank you, thank you." And so I was like, oh man, I'm going to do that next time there's a situation like this. So there were these kids, it's, swearing up a storm and everything. And I tried to do that. And before I even finished my sentence, they were like, "Shut up, F you, F you, old man, we're going to kick your ass." And so like, it just didn't work out. So I pitched it as like, this guy is the Charlie Brown of activism. Like, he's trying to do the right thing, but he just keeps on screwing up. And I can't tell you how many times I referred to the Charlie Brown Christmas while we were shooting, like, everything, because I think that has everything. He's trying to do the right thing. Everybody is just, nothing's going right. There's a moment where it gets all serious and Linus, drops his thing, and there's just like cool music, and sort of he gets a little tiny win at the end, and so I just kept on saying, like, that's it. Like, my character can never win big, but it's just enough for him to keep on trying, just enough for him to keep on trying. So, just going in to pitch the stuff, all these networks try to intimidate you with their big posters of all their successes in the hallway. So when you go, you're walking down the hall, you feel smaller and smaller and smaller. I would, when I would go to pitch, and we had to pitch, we pitched all the top stuff: HBO, Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, well, all that stuff. When I would drive into the parking lot, I brought all my awards. So I brought my ink pot, and I put it all on the dashboard. And I just psyched myself up. Like,
right.
They need you. You don't need them. They need you. And you are here because no one else can do what you do, you just have to talk. So, and the other thing I took into the office with me was my 500-page collection from Dark Horse. Dark Horse did, there was a time probably 20 years ago where it was like trendy to have a 500-page collection. And it was terrible because it was terrible to mail. So I never really kept it in my house like I mail out all my other books. So, but I ordered 10 of those to go in my meetings. And I went into each meeting, and we would do the pitch. And at the end, I would stand up, and I would pull that book out, and I would chuck it up in the air, and it would slam onto the middle of the table. I said, "There's your first 10 seasons." And I would walk out.
Oh my, no, you didn't. Really?
I swear to you.
Really?
And in Vancouver, after a few drinks, the Hulu executive said to me, he said, when you sold the show is when you threw that book up.
Oh man.
Slammed on the table. Yeah. So
that is rich. That is so rich. Man, that is great. That is so great. And now, of course, everybody's going to have freaking, brick-sized stuff they're going to be carrying. No, that is such a great, also, no, I'm thinking back to all those times that you were on stage with your band, the sense of theater, all of your talks that you gave. They were kind of preparing you for those pitches.
Totally.
Yeah.
All the way back to the Michael Jackson stuff.
No kidding.
It's I would say this, I will never, no one will ever mistake me for being some fine craftsman or, when it comes to cartoons, music, any of that stuff. But I know how to put on a show.
That's it. True.
And really, like, that's, I mean, that's what they want you to do. And so,
Well, a little bit in on that making of the show that you talk about. Yeah, you talked about the writers' room, and a lot of people may not know that people come in with a script, but then there's lots of contributions. And if you take particularly a show like The Simpsons or something, somebody says they're the writer for the show. Well, about a third of what they sent in actually gets in, but it's a really collaborative.
totally.
Now, of course, when our cartoonists, you were writing all your own stuff. I mean, you were like it, and you create, like you said, you created the characters, you create the world. You are in complete control. Tell me a little bit about your letting go of that, or was there a delicate dance, particularly at the beginning when you're having to maneuver that?
Totally. It was a delicate dance. And it's weird when we had a writer's room, and it's weird when people are sort of dissecting your character. And that's one of the reasons why we named him Keith instead of Keith, so we could sort of distinguish that. But there were some tough decisions that had to be made early on. My wife was a character in the show, but she was my girlfriend in it, and we actually had to remove her because, like, I was too close to the character, and I was just like, no, like, we can't, like, we had an actress like play her in the pilot, and we had to like remove we had to reshoot that stuff. And but like, it was, I would be like, no, she would never do that. No, like, it was just too much. So it felt a lot better to have this completely made up character that we had in there. So Adrian, but Adrian
who's also from New Zealand, right? I mean, she's not even from anywhere nearby, right?
Yeah, exactly. And she's named after my wife's brother, Adrian. So that's but yeah, it's like, the first season was a little tough because I think it was hard to convince some folks that we could address this serious stuff and do the satire and do the humor. So, the Black People for Rent was a difficult one to do. And I kept on saying, but I did it. Like, I did that in real life. I like hung up posters that said Black People for Rent.
Right.
And
did you really do that?
Yeah, I did do that.
Whoa. That's, I mean, can we just digress for a minute there? Because I said that's amazing that you did it, and because this is a big part of the early part of the season is, as the Keith character is trying to identify, grab onto his new identity, he explores this possibility of this quote unquote satirical thing. Well, tell us a little bit. Do you want to explore that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I saw the gentrification happening in San Francisco, and I was like, wow, this is a formerly Black neighborhood. So why don't I hang up these these posters? Because I was at a party and someone like just thanked me for being there, because me and my roommate were like the only people of color there. And I was like, man, I wish we could get paid for doing this.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I created these things and these posters, and I put them up, and I had this phone number on it, which was my voicemail, and I didn't have any special answer machine on it. I just a message on it. I just took all these messages, and I literally got messages from people who got the joke, who didn't get the joke, racists calling up, then inquiries like that. I'm not even sure if they were real or not, but the most calls I got were from Black people looking for work.
Yeah,
and
Black man for rent.
Yeah, and that was just like, I was like, this is too, when that happened, and this happened 20 years ago, I said, this is like too deep to just be a comic strip. There's like something more here. And I will tell you this, like, it was the original version of Black People for Rent, the episode
Mhm.
was hilarious.
Mm.
Like so, like in a way that but so, but some people in the room didn't believe that it was as hilarious as it truly was. So
Mhm, mhm,
a
mhm.
different version came
Right.
out of the writer's room, but
That is
you
so interesting
know,
because that's you're talking about the compromise that you have to make because
yeah,
and you do
yeah.
you have to come out and I guess so many whether it's films or comedies there's so much compromise and a lot nobody comes out happy. But at the end of your 8 weeks, did you come out happy?
Oh, totally, totally.
Mm.
Like, I mean, there were a lot of issues like in the writer's room or in that first season, and we had to do a lot of the writing on the fly up in Vancouver where we shot
Okay.
the first season.
Mhm,
And when you're in it for so long, you just don't
mhm.
even know if
Yeah,
anything,
you don't. Right,
like,
right.
you're just like, oh my God, like, is any of this going to be good? Like, is any of
Mhm.
this? But I will say this, like, we showed up in Vancouver without episode 7 and 8 even written. Like,
No, really, no
and
kidding. And
so,
they were good. They were
so
good.
the
Yeah.
Cubby episode and then the
Mhm.
final episode were written while we were up there.
Ah,
Um, a couple of the writers from the writers' room worked on those, but again, it's a hugely collaborative effort. So like uh, my whole pitch was, I wanted to do one about an animal and everyone caring about an animal
oh,
more
yeah.
than they
Yeah.
care about
Mhm.
people.
And the perfect animal too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the other one was like, oh man, it'd be great if the cops sued the cartoonist for,
Oh,
trying,
yeah.
like, it's very, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh, yeah.
I'm triggered by your comic strip. So, and
Oh,
so,
man.
yeah, so that was really fun. And,
Yeah.
people must know, I don't know how many people know this by now, but I got to play the person dressed as the koala. So I got to punch
No,
my,
I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah.
gosh, that's
So
delicious.
I was in the koala outfit when I punched him more.
Oh man, that is great. Well, I hope for anyone here who hasn't seen it, you're going to want to see it now just for that one clip, all right? When Keith makes his appearance. Now, I thought so let's just refer this back to our kind of overseer here because I think people would like to ask questions, right? Can
Yeah,
we
we
do
do have
questions?
a few things in the Q&A. I can read them for you,
Well,
or
I tell you, I'm going to ask one more question of Keith, and
sure.
then we'll open the floor up. So just to let everybody know, they can start firing some questions, in, and we'll return to those in a second. But Keith, I'm just going to go now just quickly to the second season. Now I know I'm not going to explore things you're going to be saying in it, so I know that you're kind of be very circumspect about that. But the one question I have is there's this notion that the second novel for anybody is the hardest. The first novel, it took you, your whole lifetime to make, right, and perfect and carve, and then you get a book deal, and then they want the next novel, 1 year later, and you suddenly have to pack all this thing in. I'm curious for you, the second season, was it easier because you've already done it? Did it have its particular challenges? I mean, what was it like?
It had all new challenges. Like,
Yeah, right.
it is interesting. And your point is well taken, which is you definitely are like, okay, like, so what are you going to do for an encore,
Mhm.
and but I had a really good idea of what I wanted to do in the second season, which is to explore the commodification of woke, which
Oh yeah.
is like sort of what happens when it becomes a brand,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
so so that's what we explore in it. And but there's a whole lot of things that we had to manage because we finished the first season 2 weeks before the country shut down because of COVID.
Mhm.
So
Right.
we beat COVID before it hit. But this time around, like, COVID protocols, we couldn't shoot in Vancouver anymore because, like, but when we were making the plans, like, they had to quarantine, you had to quarantine for 2 weeks. Like, it was super hardcore, all this different stuff. So we moved the production to Atlanta. That's like just one of the reasons. But so Atlanta was like a whole different set of issues. So it's just trying to, shooting in two different cities and trying to sort of make sure that, because Atlanta does not pass for San Francisco at all. And we shot in Vancouver in the winter. So, so it was gray, but it also rained and snowed like 32 straight days. So like it's some of the problems that came up forced us to shoot inside because we couldn't shoot outside because there was snow everywhere and it's supposed to be San Francisco. But in Atlanta, we shot in the summer. So it was just like hot as anything. And just, so that had its own issues and set of problems. But as far as like, it's one of those things where I think the ideas are good. I think the episodes are funny. Again, you're in it for so long that you start to, it's like when you write the same word down 20 times and then you start going, am I even spelling this word right?
Yeah, right.
Like, that's the thing. It's like, I think it's funny, but we'll see. We'll, the world would be the judge of that. But
and if from just as a timeline that they give you the green light on the series, how long is it between that green light and the end of the your final production?
That's interesting because you never know how they do the streaming stuff, how they analyze this stuff. So they look at everything from how many people watch and how many people binge it, how many people watch it again. Do they jump to another thing on the site to check it out, or what brought them in the first place? What do they post online? Like there's so much stuff that they look at. So we were waiting, and then we had this really cool big call where everybody's on, and they announced the second season. That's great. And then you just we went about looking for a new showrunner, and like you go through all these like writer, we only brought, there was me and the co-creator that was still in the room, and we brought one writer back from season 1 and then added the rest. And so you go through all that, and I feel like everything goes for like 3 months. So the show drops, you promote it, and then there's 3 months, and then they tell you you're good to go.
Okay.
And then you write for 3 months, and then you go and do production for 3 months, and then you do post-production for 3 months, and then you promote it for 3 months.
Yeah, man. So
And
it's
then
40,000 months altogether about. Right? Yeah.
It's a slog, but
Yeah.
it's a slog in the sense that you just don't mind it because you are working with all these people. Like even if you have a bad day, someone else is picking you up. Like it's not like cartooning,
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than like I did 9 deadlines a week for 11 years.
Yeah.
Someone dies in your family, it's like, that doesn't matter. You still got to do it. Still be funny. Still do this.
Yeah.
And at least on a show, it's just like, guys, like, I don't have it today. Can you guys, carry it? I'll be back tomorrow, that type of stuff.
Yeah. Great, man. Great. Well, hey, JP, I'm going to throw it over to you. Any questions that you might have? I certainly got a million. I think me and Keith could talk for like the next 10 hours, I think.
Here's a perfect,
or at least the next 3 months we could talk.
3 months, 3
Okay.
months.
Yeah.
Here's a perfect one. What was the best surprise or really good one from the production of season 1 of Woke or season 2 of Woke?
There were a ton of surprises. I mean, we always had this idea that episode 6, the threesome episode, there's an episode where they're all in the apartment and Gunther's going to have a threesome, and it just, doesn't work out the way he hopes it would. And we all we didn't like that episode at all. We were like, man, this is the bad, because there's no animation in it. It's pretty, it's not as funny, I don't think, as some of the other episodes. And it's a bottle episode, which means a bottle episode, they want you to do at least one bottle episode every season where it doesn't go anywhere. Like it's all shot on one set because it's cheaper. It's easier. It goes a little faster. And so we thought that was going to be the episode that everyone hates. And it turned out to be like a lot of people's favorite episode.
I love that episode, man. I love that episode.
Yeah. So like, it's just, you just don't know. You just sit there and like, all right. And the same thing with the Cubby episode, which is that Cubby episode was so difficult because most of it was shot on a bus, and they were really driving the bus around on a loop the whole time. And the humming of the motor totally drowned out everybody's vocals. So it just sounded terrible. It was the one place where it really didn't look like San Francisco at all, because you saw mountains in the background, you saw like just weird stuff, and it was, the first edit of that was just a mess. And I think that Mo was like, oh my God, I don't know if anything's but it's just amazing what happens when you just bear down and you start cutting it the right way and adding things and doing certain things, and like then you start to see it go, start to get over the hump where it's like you're not embarrassed by it anymore. It's actually like it and then it starts to be really good. And I love just I don't know, like I guess the surprises are you get surprises every day when you write a particular line, and it's funny, or it's gonna be something, but then the actor does something with it that is like way better than you ever imagined it, And Blake Anderson is such a pro and so good. Gunther was the hardest person to cast.
He was great,
character.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Gunther
he was the hardest.
fantastic.
The people who came through were either they were great, they were funny, but they weren't real. Like they weren't real. He has an ability to bring humanity even when he's just talking about drugs all the time. And there's something about him that is just super professional and really good. Sashir is a great improviser, and just really like, she just throws this different stuff out. T Murph this is his first big role, and his enthusiasm, like he was so overexcited in the first reading. Like there's like this first reading that you do in front of all the executives, and he was so nervous that he just went off script and started swearing and making stuff up. And it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And everyone was like, oh no. And what he did was, after he went and got his acting coach and worked his ass off. And so when we went up to Vancouver and started doing it, like his first big scene was the walk and talk where they find the wallet in the
yeah.
And everyone was all like holding their breath, because it's like, man, if he comes off like he did at that reading, it's gonna be a mess. But he was amazing, and we were just like, we got a show here.
Well, he's crushing it. Plus, I get a feeling now that, as you mentioned, I felt that he was getting better as the season went on. Maybe he was getting more comfortable in the part and all that stuff, or what was that?
Yeah, just, and each one of them, they've got a little bit of that character in them,
Right.
And so it just really helps. And, so their improvisations or the way they say, they'll get something in a script and say, well, I would say it this way. And
Oh,
they
yeah. Okay.
they usually come up with something
Yeah.
much better. And so I just, all those surprises. And when you think of, I just think of all the little jokes that we either came up with on set, or like, I would say, the way they would edit something, and I would say, leave this in, like, leave this in. This is and people would argue with me, and I'd be like, no, leave this in. And
Mhm, mhm.
then someone says, oh, like an executive's like, oh, I love this part. Those type of things. It's very, I don't know, makes you feel good that you push the stuff. But the other thing is, I guess a lot of people said to me, like, when they talk about the surprising thing, people, when they talk to me, they go, it's amazing how much of your work and style is retained in the show.
Yeah.
Because you always hear about how stuff gets adapted, and then the stuff gets, people's original work gets, thrown out or whatever. I always, I've experienced, growing up in hearing everybody say, oh yeah, I sold this to this and they just wrecked it. I said to myself when this was going down, I said, listen, if this is going to get wrecked, I want to be right in the middle of it. So I see where and how it went wrong.
Right.
Like where, and so I can say, oh, okay, that's why they used that. That's why they did this or whatever. So it's that I'm glad I was there to see it, because if we failed, then I'd be like, listen, I did my best. So
Sure.
yeah.
Well, JP, do we have room for one more
Yeah.
question, you think?
We got two more questions here.
Okay.
The first one's actually going back to Keith's presentations. When you do a slideshows outside the US, do people take it as a story uniquely about the US, or do they see their own countries in it?
Oh no, I think everybody sees the US as either we're not at least we're not the US. We're bad, but we're not the US. No, they see us as unique in how we manage to screw things up. Listen, we're either a cautionary tale for other countries or what, but no, but every country has I've had so many people say stuff like, oh, like in Brazil, they're like, oh, we're not as bad as the United States, but Brazil has plenty of issues. Canada, Germany, like those, you could easily point to very similar issues, but US supersizes everything, makes it a much bigger thing. And our ability to deny the issues that we have in this country is tremendous. And so, yeah,
Great.
Yeah, but it's always amazing to be able to do, present the slideshow in different countries and stuff. But I love going to states like South Dakota and doing it,
Yeah.
it's interesting stuff.
Yeah. JP, you got one more question there?
This one's, let's just bring this full circle back to Hollywood and pitching. Beyond schmoozing in LA, any other suggestions?
Well, here I will say this, like, I got out of LA and I felt like I'd met everybody I needed to meet. That like, so I felt like, okay, the team's in place, I can just fly in. Like we had 2 kids, we were living in this tiny little apartment, like, and the boys were starting to get bigger. And so I was like, I can just fly in. So and so many people were saying, don't go. You don't know when your ship is going to come in, blah, 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 all that type of thing. And it's just like, if you stay, then like you blink your eyes and you've been there for 2 decades or something like that. So I got out, and I feel like leaving was the best thing I could have done, because I feel like my producers were surprised that I left. I think they were like, oh man, he really did go. We got to really work hard and get him back here, So they really they got things together and they were really organized and they made all my pitches in 1 week. Like I think if I lived there, it would have been just stretched out and oh, you can come anytime, blah blah blah. But because I was there, it was just intense. And so I was doing 2 pitches a day, and I think I probably hit Hulu after doing the pitch 4 or 5 times before then. So by then I was like, well-oiled machine. And I think that really helped. But as far as any more advice as far as pitching goes, intellectual property, own your rights, go in there understanding that you are valuable to them. Don't be shocked by some of the gatekeepers. You'd be because you're going to be like, this droll person in the corner is the gateway to comedy at this network, that type of stuff. I mean, we thankfully have some really great executives that we work with at Hulu. But yeah, and I would say more than anything else, don't try to cater to what you think people are going to like. Just tell your story. And I say this with all cartoonists and stuff who do autobio stuff. Tell your story, because if you don't tell it, somebody else is going to tell it. They're going to get it wrong. I think because I tell my unique story, I think people, I had actors who were coming in, like when they were coming into audition, you'd be like, oh my God, like that guy is from, Atlanta. Oh, that guy's from, straight out of Compton. That one's from, I was just all excited by who would walk in the door in audition. And every time they walked out, they were like, thank you for creating characters that are different than what I usually have to audition for,
Wow.
And that's just from, because here's the thing, like, and my wife said it to me. She said, like, when I first started dating you and meeting your family and friends and the people you grew up with, it's like, all of you don't talk like the Black people in TV and movies. And I said, do you know why? It's because all the Black people in TV and movies are approved by white executives. Like they are the ones who create these, they say, oh no, it's got to be this way or it's got to be that way. But if you let Black people do it, they wouldn't be like, just you would hear you would see a very different image. And that's what I think that's what we're trying to do, is sort of upend. Like I am so against, I didn't want anybody with a gun in my show. Any Black people with guns. I didn't want any Black men dressing in drag unless they were real drag queens. and I didn't want them just dancing in front of the camera unless there was there was a legitimate, they were dancing with the other people dancing. So that was like a very important thing to me. And it's just, it still is all very important to me. But again, there was a compromise. This is I'll end it on this story. At the end of the pilot, the first episode, my character gets mugged by a guy that sort of kind of a little bit looks like him, right? Like that was the thing that sort of says that the police, were looking for this guy. So he gets mugged by this guy. And I thought, I didn't want that guy to have a gun. And like the white executives wanted him to have a gun. And because they were saying like the mugger's not scary enough. Like, why is the, because the way I'd written it was like, it was much more casual. He was like a fan, and and he was, why is everyone saying hi, Kirsten? Did she just come?
She was just behind you. Yes, she was
Oh,
just
okay.
behind you. My dog was in here earlier, so but nobody said hi to my dog. I think there's a big difference between your wife and my dog.
That's funny. So they were like, well, the mugger's not scary enough. The mugger's not scary enough. And it just showed the sort of chasm between the white executives and the black creators, which is the point of the scene, was that the experience with the cops is far more scary than getting mugged by somebody that looks like you. And but to them, to white executives, the police aren't scary. It's like this black mugger. And the compromise was he lifts up his shirt and you see like a gun in his pants. Like he never holds the gun, but that was, another compromise I made. But
Well, listen, Keith Knight, I tell you what, this was so much fun. It was, I do believe we could talk about all sorts of things, whether it's cartoon related, whether it's related to your projects, or just generally about life in general and our crazy world and country that we live in.
yeah.
And we would have a blast along the way. And I think maybe I could speak on behalf of our brothers and sisters in this craft, that we're all real proud of you. We're wishing you the best. We're all pulling for you. And we'd love, of course, to get you back another time just to chat and catch up, as things are going along. And you're going to have lots of more adventures, I no doubt. You're probably going to win another Lifetime Achievement Award sometime or another, right? So you just have to keep on going. But it's been so great to be here. And I just want to, wish you best of luck.
Thank you very much. I am humbled. And listen, like I said this 20 years ago, I think, or whenever American Splendor came out, I was introducing Harvey Pekar in San Francisco. And I said, this movie's so good that like maybe 15 or 20 years down the line, maybe I'll have a movie, a TV show. And I feel that way with everybody. Like the success of this will pave the way for, they're just going to look for more cartoonists and more creators, and that's the thing, is like, I just didn't want to be the one to close the door on this. If my thing failed, they're like, let's not ever work with a cartoonist ever again. But thankfully, someone else is going to come after me, and it's just going to keep on going. And hopefully, like, we can all just get in there, because that's what they're looking for. I swear to you. And especially with COVID now, because with cartoonists, you can animate so much, and it's just like, no one has to be like, I think the next project that I do is going to be animated, but I think everybody has this opportunity. So get your stuff out there, and we'll see you. I'll see you on Zoom at some fancy awards.
That's right. Well, good to talk to you, Keith. Did I pass this over to JP? Is that the thing to do now?
It is, and we are out. Thank you all so much.
That was great.
Oh man, that was so much fun, Keith. Seriously.